Hi, this is DJ Chuang,
And I'm Will Sampson.
and we're here to talk about the whole WALP experience because I wasn't there, and I want to hear from the guy who was.
I'm the guy who was.
So WALP is like, it happened, was it last week? And
Yes.
is the Worship, Arts, and Liturgy and Preaching, I think. I don't know what it stands for.
Worship, Arts, Liturgy, and Preaching Conference. It happened in Kentucky last week, which was April 18th to 21st.
Like a Monday to Thursday gig.
Yes, Monday to Thursday. Actually, it was just Monday night to Thursday. And so.
Well, I wish I would have been there. I've heard a little bit of buzz, and I'm just amazed at what came out of the event, and I haven't heard about it firsthand from someone who was there as an eyewitness.
Mm-hmm.
And I've only picked up bits and pieces on the blogosphere, and I'm very curious what happened. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, there's a couple bloggers that have talked about it. I, as someone who blogs, should have blogged about it more, but I haven't. But it was an amazing event. There was about 300 people there, and there was a number of really great things. Probably the most significant thing to me was the fact that the 300 people were comprised from so many parts of the church. So there were Roman Catholics there. There were Greek Orthodox people there. There were certainly a large collection of evangelicals. There was a large number of mainline Protestants there.
But were there fundamentalists?
I would argue there was a couple people that I would say, yeah, they were fundamentalists.
Really?
Yeah.
How about that?
I don't even know.
They broke the ranks and infiltrated.
Yeah, well, right.
Because I've heard they've done that in past events.
Well, actually, yes. So, interestingly enough, when I was at the Kairos event, there was a guy there who was great, really great. He's in charge of church planting for the Southern Baptists.
Oh.
And out in Central Maryland, I guess, because he's in Frederick, whatever that is, Frederick, Maryland. And at one point he said, well, now guys, I got to tell you, I'm a fundamentalist, and I'm okay with that. And then he went on to sort of talk about what his deal was. But it's interesting that these events, these sort of events, especially if they focus on worship or preaching, it seems to me, tend to get people that are simply rethinking forms.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I do think there are some people that are maybe just, I don't know about fundamentalists, but are maybe not necessarily part of the emergent conversation or the emerging church, the American emerging church conversation.
You know, on a very surface level, there is some form to the conversation. That's one layer, certainly the most visible layer. And so from someone outside looking in, it'd be like, oh, they're just doing church in a different form.
Yes.
It's the candles and coffee house kind of.
The candles and coffee crowd, yes. Which certain of us.
But for those of us who are in the conversation, realize that there's some very foundational things that are happening.
Yes. These are theological issues that are at stake. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the tenor of the conversation?
So, well, to answer your question, yes, there were even fundamentalists there. Yes.
Yes.
There's a lot
Little
of
rabbit trail. Sorry.
There's a lot of people there. The tenor of the conversation was set really the first night, which was with the idea that we don't necessarily all have to agree, but we're all here together to figure out how to be the people of God in our time. I mean, how to sort of live out this thing that we're trying to do, and the way we do that is through our congregations. Mm-hmm. Brian McLaren didn't expressly say this in the words that he spoke the first night, or at any time, at least that I heard him. But there's this idea, in Newbegin's book, The Gospel in a Pluralist Society, he talks about the idea that a congregation is a hermeneutic of the gospel. Mm-hmm. And that was really, that ethic sort of pervaded the whole gathering. The idea that everything we're doing is going to show how we're living out the gospel. And so that was really interesting. And there was very intentional and very specific discussion of how we interact together as the people of Christ. So how we come together, how the evangelical church might come together with Roman Catholicism, how mainline church might come together with Greek Orthodox, and how how we're all sort of need to come together in the work of God in our time to reflect on the gospel.
Mm. So how did this event revolve around the 3 or 4 themes of worship and arts and liturgy and preaching? Why not just talk about what it is to be the church, or how did that come about?
Right. Well, in terms of what the thinking was behind it, like why did they separate it out? At least from what I saw, and we have to sort of rabbit trail here for just a second, because what's interesting about even interviewing me is because I was there, but a lot of my time there was spent in private hallway conversations and with meeting some people. So
we're here to hear about Will's experience of WALP.
This is my experience of WALP. I was not the most faithful attender to every session. I will admit that. Plus, I was also I did some of the airport runs, so which was interesting too, because that meant I came into conversation with some of the speakers and things like that.
That's
so
great.
I had a whole other type of experience than what I had anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get to every session, and it might be helpful to interview some people that were at every session to get maybe a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thinking was that different people engaged the church in different ways, and so there needs to be almost tracks for how people engage the church, and so there was a morning session and plenary sessions. There was a morning plenary session and an evening plenary session where everyone was together. And then there were tracks throughout the day based on whether you were interested in worship, art, liturgy, or preaching. And that really it was more reflective of the type of role that one might tend to play in the church. And the tracks revolved more around that.
Okay. Because it almost sounds like, to me, having been part of the emerging church conversation, at least casually, and certainly reading on the blogosphere, that there's church as a worship service.
Yes.
And then there's church from Monday to Saturday, the living out as followers of God in the way of Jesus.
Right.
And it sounds like this conference revolved around the service part of how the congregation comes together, and what would that look like, and how does that reflect theologically, maybe?
Very much so.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, that's an interesting observation. Nobody expressly said this, at least in any of the meetings that I was in.
Hmm.
But I did get a sense that everyone I don't know, and maybe this is my emergent lens or my emerging church lens on this, but it seems to me at least that there was a sense that everyone realized this was not everything that happens in the life of the church or a particular church. It was reflective of some of the practices of the church. So yeah, I would tend to agree with that.
So by having that as kind of the starting point or the common reference point of the gathering,
yes.
How did that flavor the conversations you were a part of?
Well,
outside of the program, particularly since that's where you spent most of your time.
Right. Well, actually, right. Well, it's interesting too, because you talk about, or we talked about the idea of sort of living out faith, and it seems to me too that one of the interesting aspects of coming together just around the ideas of worship and liturgy is that in and of itself is hard enough. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can't, for most churches, we can't even figure out how to come together around liturgy.
Or music.
Order of service, art, or any of those sort of basic fundamental things. Like, as the people of God, we have a hard enough time just hanging out, worshiping God together. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right?
Right.
Which is crazy. That's crazy. You know what I mean? How crazy is that? And so it was good, I think, on some level, just to see that, for everyone there to see that, okay, there are a bunch of God's people who are in different contexts. There's a group of people out in LA who are doing, like, their primary music and worship function is around percussion, right? That's their expression. Yeah, it's called Tribe. Then there's there's what this particular Father Gregory and this Greek Orthodox congregation is doing, and then there's and there's all these people. They're all seeking to follow God in the way of Jesus, right? They're all seeking to do this thing, but they all have their own expression, and so the long answer to your question, sorry, but was that the conversations or the discussions, sort of a subtext for the discussions in the sessions, and certainly the conversations outside of the sessions in which I was involved, sort of had that theme, this idea that, oh, okay, we really kind of are in this together, which I think was very powerful. If we accomplished that, oh my gosh. If we as Emergent and bringing people together can help accomplish that, that's powerful.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so you had some rich times of worship together.
Yes.
I guess you both talked about it and did it.
Yes.
In a variety of forms.
Mm-hmm.
And then what else happened that weekend that was meaningful to you? I think on your blog you mentioned the real value or the product of the relationships.
It was about the relationships for me. Yeah, it was about the relationships.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, without naming names, no, it was...
Although you did already on your blog, in the show notes.
That's right. Go to willshead.typepad.com. Without naming names, it was, or getting specific at this point, it was... The real value to me in what we're doing in Emergent is building relationships. So it almost feels like there's been this sort of expected script for the church and how the church should be and how this story is lived out, and some part of it may be on track and some part of it may need course correction, but it's in that course correction that there may be some personal sacrifice. So if we start to say, living out the story of God is going to be a little different and maybe a little more radical than we may have realized, then that may involve a certain amount of personal sacrifice for some people. It certainly has for Lisa and I, for my wife and I. And so one of the things that I was able to do and sort of experience was to encounter people that are similar, that are going through similar, that have a similar story, going through similar experiences. That like us, they sort of said, we want to be part of the emerging church. We want to, we really want to figure out how to live out God's story, but that has meant a certain amount of personal sacrifice for us, and we're just glad to know that there are other people that are doing it as well, and we want to be in relationship with you. It's like it's almost like there's this relationship of people that are kind of thinking the same way about how to live out God's story. And that was powerful. That's very powerful.
It's the power of empathy.
Yes.
It's the power of knowing that we're not alone and we're not crazy.
Right.
We're struggling with what we're struggling with.
Right.
And I share some of those feelings, and I wish I could have been there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think they'll do it again?
I hope so. Yeah. I hope so. That's our goal.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that experience with us.
This was great.
We'll enjoy hearing it.
Yeah.